Parents gift $15,000 cottage. Husband claims joint property and bans in-laws from eating strawberries. When Mary received a cottage from her parents plus $15,000 for renovations, she thought life would be happier. But husband Mark not only declared, "This is joint property," but also turned the cottage into a party venue with friends, making wife clean up alone. Mother-in-law Deborah acts like the owner, giving orders from A to Z. The climax came when Mary's parents visited and Mark screamed, "Don't touch the strawberries. We don't have enough." Mary's revenge with a lawyer's help will leave Mark and his mother shocked. The brutal ending that made 5 million people applaud. Helen, Mary's mother, worried about how Mark would react. She knew his love for material possessions and feared he would only see the cottage as an opportunity for profit. Along with the cottage, her parents decided to help Mary with the renovation. The house was old and needed serious investment. George and Helen transferred $15,000 to their daughter's account. This money was their savings, set aside for a rainy day, but they had no doubt it was better to invest it in Mary's future, her peace, and happiness. Mary was touched to tears. She hugged her parents, thanking them for their generosity and care. She knew how much this money meant to them and promised the cottage would become a place where they could all gather, relax, and enjoy nature. Mark reacted to the gift with restraint. Hearing the news, he merely nodded and said, "Great, now we have a cottage." There wasn't a drop of gratitude or joy for Mary in his voice. He seemed to take it for granted, as just another confirmation of his importance. Mary noticed it but kept quiet. She hoped Mark would appreciate the gift over time and understand how much it meant to her and her parents. From the first day at the cottage, Deborah, Mark's mother, began to behave like the owner. She gave instructions on how to arrange the furniture, what flowers to plant, where to put the grill. She seemed to forget the cottage belonged to Mary, not her. Mary tried to hint gently that she also had her own opinions, but Deborah didn't listen. She thought she knew best how to run things and wasn't going to give in to anyone. All the organizational and financial worries related to the renovation and furnishing of the cottage fell on Mary and her parents. Mark didn't participate at all. He thought it was a woman's job and preferred to spend time with his friends, playing video games or watching TV. Mary didn't complain. She was used to doing everything herself, but dissatisfaction was brewing inside. She wanted Mark to show at least some interest in the cottage, to help her choose materials, or just offer his assistance. George and Helen came to the cottage every weekend. They helped Mary with cleaning, painting the walls, and planting. George handled the construction work. He knew how to do everything with his own hands. Helen kept the house tidy, cooked, and created a cozy atmosphere. They tried to do everything possible to make the cottage a real home for Mary, a place where she could relax and unwind. Mary was grateful to her parents for their help and support. She saw how hard they were trying for her sake and felt obliged to do everything possible to live up to their expectations. But at the same time, she realized she couldn't rely on their help forever. She needed to learn to solve her problems and protect her interests. One evening, as Mary sat on the porch drinking tea, Deborah approached her. She sat next to her and began to talk about how to properly care for the garden. Mary listened absently. Her thoughts were far away. She was thinking about how tired she was of her mother-in-law's constant interference in her life, how tired she was of Mark's consumerist attitude, how she wished they would at least once be interested in her opinion. "Mary, are you even listening to me?" Deborah asked, noticing her distracted look. "Yes, of course," Mary replied, trying to give her voice a cheerful tone. "I'm saying you need to treat the apple trees for pests, or there won't be any harvest," Deborah continued. "Okay, I'll take care of it on the weekend," Mary said. "No, you don't understand. It needs to be done immediately," Deborah insisted. "I'll take care of it myself, and you better do something else. You can't do anything right anyway." Mary couldn't stand it anymore. "Deborah, this is my cottage, and I'll decide what to do," she said, trying to stay calm. "What do you think you're saying?" Deborah exclaimed. "I'm trying to help you here, and you're being rude to me." "You're not helping me, you're just giving orders," Mary replied. "I'm tired of it." "How dare you talk to me like that?" Deborah shouted. I'm your husband's mother. You should respect me. I respect you, but I won't let you boss me around in my own house, Mary said. Deborah turned red with anger. She got up from her chair and left, slamming the door. Mary remained sitting on the porch alone. She felt empty and tired. She wanted to cry, but she held back. She knew she had to be strong, that she had to protect her interests. That night, Mary couldn't fall asleep for a long time. She lay in bed, thinking about her life. She realized things couldn't go on like this, that she needed to change something. Mark began to use the cottage as his property, not considering Mary. He started inviting friends to noisy parties without asking her opinion. The music blared until late at night. Laughter and shouts echoed around, disturbing the neighbors and depriving Mary of peace. After such gatherings, there was a terrible mess that she had to clean up alone. Mark just shrugged. What's the big deal? It was fun. All current expenses related to the cottage also fell on Mary. Utility bills, house and garden maintenance, taxes. All of this was paid from her personal funds. Mark didn't offer any help, believing it was her concern. After all, in his opinion, the cottage was now common property. He didn't even bother to find out how much these expenses cost. He simply automatically passed all the bills on to her. Mary noticed Mark openly stating in conversations with friends, "This is our property. Now, everything is joint. We're the kings here." She was unpleasant to hear these words because she knew he hadn't invested a penny in the cottage. Everything was bought and renovated with her parents' money. But Mark seemed to genuinely believe that it was now his merit too. He was proud he had a cottage, although he had made no effort to acquire it. Mary tried to endure to keep the peace in the family. She didn't want to quarrel with Mark and his mother. She hoped they would eventually understand the cottage was her personal property and would begin to treat her with respect. But her patience was gradually coming to an end. With each day, it became more difficult for her to restrain her emotions. A sense of injustice and resentment grew in her soul. She often remembered her father's words when he gave her the cottage. "This is your place, Mary. Here you can rest your soul, gather strength. Do here whatever you want." But instead, the cottage had become a source of constant stress and irritation. She felt her personal space was violated, that her rights were trampled on. One day, after another noisy party organized by Mark, Mary couldn't take it anymore. She told him everything that had been building up inside her. "Mark, why do you never ask me before inviting your friends here? Why don't you help me clean up after them? Why do you think you can dispose of my property as your own?" Mark was surprised by her angry tirade. He was used to Mary always being silent and agreeing with him. He didn't expect her to ever dare to contradict him. "What's wrong with you?" he asked. "Why are you so angry? I just wanted everyone to have fun." "You have fun, and I have to endure all this," Mary replied. "I'm tired of your selfishness and your mother. You both think I owe you everything, but that's not true. I also have the right to respect and personal space." Mark tried to hug her, but she pushed him away. "Don't touch me. I don't want to see you." She went to her room and locked herself in there. She cried all night, feeling lonely and miserable. She realized things couldn't go on like this, that she needed to change something in her life. In the morning, Mary decided to consult with her parents. She called them and told them everything that was happening at the cottage. She admitted she was struggling, and she couldn't take such treatment anymore. George and Helen were very concerned about her story. They knew Mark was a selfish and irresponsible person, but they didn't think he would become so insolent. They advised Mary not to be silent and to stand up for her rights. "You shouldn't let them treat you like that," Helen said. "You deserve better." George added, "If you need it, we'll help you. We won't let them offend you." Mary thanked her parents for their support. She felt a little better, knowing she wasn't alone in this fight. Mary's parents decided to visit their daughter at the cottage. It was their first visit after the renovation was completed, and Mary hoped they would like the result of their joint efforts. She dreamed of a quiet family evening, of conversations over tea on the porch, of walks in the garden. But as it often happened lately, reality turned out to be quite different. When George and Helen arrived, Mark greeted them with clear dissatisfaction. No welcoming smile, no words of greeting. He just mumbled something inaudible under his nose and went into the house, leaving Mary to fuss with the bags and show her parents their room. "Well, since you're here, entertain yourselves," came from the living room as Mary escorted her parents upstairs. She blushed with shame, but tried not to show it. George and Helen exchanged glances, but said nothing. Mary knew they saw and understood everything. After a short rest, George and Helen went out into the garden. Mary followed them, trying to smooth out the awkwardness. She showed them new plantings, talked about her plans for the future. Her parents listened carefully, nodding approvingly, but their eyes showed anxiety. At the end of the garden grew large strawberries, juicy, ripe, fragrant. George, seeing the berries, involuntarily exclaimed, "What a delight! Mary, can we pick some? I want to remember the taste of real summer." Mary happily agreed. She already imagined them all eating fresh strawberries together, washing them down with cold lemonade. But then Mark intervened. He jumped out of the house like a devil out of a box and shouted, "No, don't you dare touch them. We don't have enough for ourselves. Don't touch them." George's face turned pale. Helen grabbed his hand, trying to calm him. Mary felt anger boiling inside her. She looked at Mark as if she were seeing him for the first time. His eyes were filled with malice and greed. He really didn't want to share the strawberries, even with his wife's parents. "Mark, what are you saying?" Mary asked quietly, trying to contain the tremor in her voice. "These are my parents, and we have enough strawberries." "Enough," Mark mimicked. "Do you even understand how much effort goes into this cottage, how much money, and all this for whom? For you and your whims." "Mark, stop it," Mary snapped at him. "Don't embarrass me in front of my parents." "What? Is the truth stinging your eyes?" Mark wouldn't stop. "Let them know what they're spending their money on. On a cottage that only I need." George and Helen exchanged glances. Their eyes showed not only disappointment, but also some new firm determination. They were silent, but Mary knew this incident would be a turning point. She saw the last remnants of their patience collapsing as a steely will replaced tenderness. Mary couldn't restrain herself anymore. She felt anger bursting out as words flew off her lips on their own. "Mark, you're wrong," she said firmly. "This cottage is a gift from my parents to me, and the money for the renovation they gave to me. You're nobody here." So that's how you're talking," Mark sneered. "So I'm nobody. And who's supporting you?" "I work, Mark," Mary reminded him, "and I earn enough to support myself. And if you're so worried about money, maybe you should look for a better job." "How dare you talk to me like that?" Mark raged. "I'm your husband. I'm the head of the family." "No, Mark, you're not the head of the family," Mary objected. "You're just an egoist who thinks only about himself. You don't respect me or my parents. You don't value anything but money and entertainment." Mark raised his hand to Mary, but George managed to intercept it. "Don't you dare raise your hand to my daughter," he said sternly, "or I'll forget you're her husband." Mark wrenched his hand away and glared at George. "Who are you to tell me what to do?" he hissed. "You're just an old fool who doesn't know what to do with his money." "Mark, be quiet," Mary pleaded. "Don't talk about my father like that." "What? Is the truth stinging your eyes?" Mark wouldn't stop. "Let them know what they really are." Helen went to Mary and hugged her. "Don't worry, darling," she said quietly. "We understand everything. We see how hard it is for you." Mary felt tears welling up in her throat. She hugged her mother in return and cried. She was ashamed in front of her parents for Mark's behavior, for her own weakness. George led Mark aside and said something quietly to him. Mark listened to him, frowning, but didn't say anything. Then George returned to Mary and Helen. "Let's go, girls," he said. "We need to talk." They went into the house and sat down at the table in the living room. George looked at Mary and Helen with a serious expression on his face. "I think we need to decide something," he said. "Things can't go on like this." "I know, Dad," Mary replied. "I think so too." "I see how hard it is for you, darling," Helen said. "I don't want you to suffer." "I don't want you to suffer either," George added. You deserve a better life." Mary looked at her parents with gratitude. She knew they would always support her, that they would always be on her side. "I think I need to divorce Mark," she said quietly. George and Helen exchanged glances. "It's your decision, darling," George said. "We respect it. If that's what you've decided, we'll support you," Helen added. "We'll help you with everything." After returning home, George and Helen, Mary's parents, didn't delay. The shock of Mark's actions at the cottage was replaced by a determination to act. The very next day, they invited a lawyer to their home, not just for a consultation in case, as had happened before, but with a specific purpose: to legally secure Mary's rights to the cottage and protect her from the encroachments of her out-of-control husband. Mary, although she felt the support of her parents, still felt anxious. Divorce is a serious step, and she was afraid of the unknown, afraid of condemnation, afraid of being alone. But memories of Mark's rudeness, the constant pressure from her mother-in-law, and her own powerlessness in the face of their arrogance pushed her forward. She understood that if she retreated now, she would forever remain in this cage, where her opinion meant nothing, where her labor was devalued, where she was simply not respected. The next day, the family gathered again at the cottage. The atmosphere was tense, like a stretched string. Mark, sensing something was wrong, gloomily watched what was happening. Deborah, as always, sat with an inscrutable face, but her eyes showed concern. George and Helen remained calm and confident, radiating support and love for their daughter. Mary, taking a deep breath, took out a folder with documents from her bag. In it was the deed of gift for the cottage, drawn up only in her name. Checks for repair work, bank statements confirming transfers from her parents. These weren't just pieces of paper. They were proof of her rights, her labor, her independence. Silence fell, broken only by the creak of the opening folder. The lawyer, a woman in her 40s in a strict business suit, carefully examined those present and began to speak in a clear, confident voice. "Dear Mark and Deborah, I am here at the request of Mary and her parents, George and Helen. My task is to clarify the issue of ownership of this cottage plot and all the buildings located on it." She paused, looking around at those present. According to the documents presented, namely the gift agreement dated, the cottage plot located at the address is the sole property of Mary. Mark frowned even more, but remained silent. Deborah fidgeted nervously on her chair. The lawyer continued. "In addition, documentary evidence has been provided that all financial investments in the repair and improvement of this plot, including checks, receipts, and bank statements, were made exclusively at the expense of the personal funds of George and Helen, Mary's parents." She paused, giving everyone the opportunity to realize what they had heard. An oppressive silence fell. Only the birds chirping outside the window could be heard, as if not noticing the storm that had broken out in this small house. Then Mary, gathering all her will into a fist, spoke calmly and firmly. "Mark, you didn't invest a penny in this cottage, not a penny of your labor, not a penny of your money. This isn't jointly acquired property." She looked straight into Mark's eyes, not looking away. There was no more fear in her eyes, only determination and confidence in her righteousness. "I have long endured your rudeness, your consumerist attitude, your disrespect for me and my parents," Mary continued. "I tried to keep the peace in the family, but I realized it's impossible when you constantly cross my boundaries and think you're allowed to do anything." Mark tried to object, but Mary raised her hand, stopping him. "Don't interrupt me. I'm not finished yet." She turned to Mark again, and steely notes sounded in her voice. "If you continue to think otherwise, if you continue to claim that this cottage is our common property, we'll deal with it in court. And I'm sure the court will rule in my favor, based on these documents." Deborah turned pale. She, accustomed to always and in everything commanding, for the first time faced such a rebuff. She realized that Mary was no longer the timid and obedient girl she once knew. Mary had changed. She had become a strong and independent woman, ready to defend her rights. For the first time, Mark couldn't find anything to answer. He was stunned. He was used to Mary always giving in to him, that she was afraid of conflicts and tried to avoid quarrels. He didn't expect she could so decisively defend her position. He realized he had underestimated her, that he had taken her kindness and patience for weakness for too long. The lawyer, seeing the confusion of Mark and Deborah, added, "I recommend you carefully study the documents presented and make the right decision. Otherwise, Mary will be forced to go to court to protect her rights." George and Helen silently watched what was happening, feeling proud of their daughter. They saw how she had transformed, how from a downtrodden and insecure woman she had turned into a strong and independent person. They understood that this day was a turning point in her life, that she had finally freed herself from the burden of toxic relationships and was ready to start a new life. Soon after that, a week later, Mary filed for divorce. She no longer saw the point in continuing a relationship with a person who didn't value, respect, or love her. She realized she deserved better, that she was worthy of happiness and love. Mark tried to persuade her, apologized, promised to change, but Mary was adamant. She knew his promises were empty words, that he would never change. She had made a decision and wasn't going to retreat. The divorce went quickly and without much difficulty. Mark, seeing that he had no chance to challenge Mary's ownership of the cottage, didn't resist. He understood he had lost, that Mary wouldn't let him manipulate her anymore. After the divorce, Mary felt relief, as if a huge weight had fallen off her shoulders. She felt free, happy, and full of energy for new achievements. Mary often invited her parents to visit. They spent time together at the cottage, walked in the forest, picked mushrooms and berries, grilled kebabs, and just talked heart to heart. Mary felt happy and grateful to have such wonderful parents who always supported and loved her. Mary realized that divorce wasn't the end of life, but the beginning of a new chapter. She learned to value herself, her interests, and her rights. She became a strong and independent woman, capable of standing up for herself and her family. She found her happiness in freedom, in creativity, and in the love of her loved ones. The cottage became for her not just a place of rest, but a symbol of her new life, a symbol of her independence and freedom.